So we're going to do an update on the damage caused by our two neighbours whilst we were on holiday. If you haven't seen the other earlier video, about 3 months ago, they decided to go down the side of our house and cut down trees, shrubs and whatever else they fancied getting their saw, etc. to, and obviously we lost the plot when we got back home from holiday to see all this damage. The one you're looking at is Fremontodendron, California Glory. 14 years ago we planted that, and we carefully trained it into a fan-shaped tree, and very little encroached over the boundary, and if it did they would just snip off any bits at the boundary, as is allowed by law. The law on boundaries is quite straightforward. If you have anything planted along the boundary and a little bit of the branch or anything goes over into the neighbour's property, they are allowed, as long as there's not a tree preservation order in place, they are allowed to trim off anything as it enters their boundary. Couple of caveats with that: they must offer to return the trimmings, and if you do not want them back, they must dispose of them themselves. They cannot just chuck everything back into your property as these neighbours did to us. All of the bits that they trimmed off, they just allowed to they either threw them back or allowed them to just fall back onto our flower beds. That could be classed as fly tipping, so yeah, do not do that. If you've got any trimmings that are legally your own, the property owners, ask them whether they'd like them back, and if not, then you have to dispose of them yourselves. So anyway, after an initial good response from the police, because we reported it as potential criminal damage, this particular tree has had about around 7 to 8 foot chopped off at the top. You can see the cut straight through the trunk there, so obviously it cannot ever grow back and attain any height again. Also note this new extension: there's no windows, there's no doors. The nearest door is about 15 foot down to the left, so that tree was not causing any loss of light or any nuisance, so there were no issues with that at all. In fact, it's worth noting that anything that is causing a nuisance or may cause a potential problem in the future, let's say this had really invasive roots and there were drains running very close to it, you could be liable for drain damage or drain blockage, that sort of thing. And if you have been spoken to or warned or informed that this may be the case in the past, then you're going to find yourself possibly liable for the repairs, etc., if you failed to take action. So yeah, a lot of interesting stuff has come out, and I'm going to leave a link on this video to this guy, Blackbeltbarrister. He has done a gardening law and nuisance trees video some months ago, which is very interesting and just covers all of the relevant points and a lot of things that you might not actually know. So I will link his excellent channel down below. So as going back to the police, yes, initially they were very good. Unfortunately, the case was being handled by an officer who was on restricted duties, and I think he was working from home, so it's really delayed things. But we did report this as potential criminal damage. He followed it up over the course of a number of months. We gave a statement where we had to digitally sign it online, and then a modification was done to it, and they actually sent out an officer to get me to sign some paperwork to modify the statement, and it's just taken weeks and weeks and weeks. About 2 weeks ago now, I was starting to get a bit impatient. You know, we're 3 months down the line, I know the neighbours had been contacted by the police. They had put a card through the door requesting them to contact, I think, Wellingborough Police, which they did, and the police told me that they were just waiting to interview the guy. And we heard nothing for a couple of weeks when the interview should have been done within that time frame, according to the police. Anyway, phoned up again, chased it, and it was eventually contacted by a completely different officer who had been given the case. And he said, well, we don't need to interview the guy, he's already admitted doing it. I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. And apparently he also told the police that we'd given him full permission to do so. So, yeah, unbelievably, he's either delusional or a complete bloody liar. But apparently I had given him permission to do whatever he liked, chop down trees, bushes, branches. Yeah, just absolutely ridiculous. Why anybody in their right mind would think that that was the case, I have no idea. Anyway, this officer who phoned me said he would come out immediately. He was going to call in to the neighbours. He said that he would probably put a community resolution order in place where they agreed to compensate us for the damage, which in this case would be replacing the damaged trees with trees of the correct size, etc. So I saw the police car next door for about, 45 minutes, and then he came into to me. I brought him into the workshop here, and he said, we're not pursuing this any further. Complete change around. And he said, they haven't killed the trees off. I said, yeah, but they've cut them in half and they can't attain, proper height again. Well, it doesn't matter. There's masses of things that you have to prove for criminal damage to get it past the CPS and all this sort of thing. And he was going on about all sorts of rules and regulations. And he said, well, look, they haven't killed it off. And I said, well, yeah, I appreciate they haven't killed it off, but I'm not entirely sure that's the point. And I said, so what you're saying is if somebody had come around beating your car up, as long as it's still drivable, that's okay. Because what he was saying was, well, the tree's still there growing, so what's the problem? And he said, I've got no idea about trees, shrubs, anything gardening, I've got no idea. And I said, have you seen the pictures that were taken, So he said, no, he hasn't seen the pictures. And I said, have you read the statements fully? He said, no, he hasn't read the statements either. So we've got an officer out here who's got no idea about trees, gardening or anything else. He hasn't seen all the photos and videos I'd already supplied, and he hasn't read the statements. And he's come out here and he's based the decision on, what he's seen, what he's been told by, next door. So, yeah, unbelievable. Anyway, I expected that to be the case. I expected the police to be able to do nothing, because I actually thought next door would just lie about it and say they hadn't done it, or just do a no comment statement, because once you've given a no comment statement, unless there's any other proof, video proof or something like that, there's very little the police can do. So I was expecting the same outcome, but just for not these reasons. So, next thing, the only recourse now is a civil action in the small claims court. We've had our solicitors looking at this for the last 3 months, and they have been incredibly slow. We keep chasing them, and every time I chase them, they say, well, unfortunately, we've got more important cases that are actually in court now to deal with. And anyone that's watched actually, I don't even think I mentioned this in the first video. We've got legal protection cover in place on, I think it's our home buildings and contents insurance, and it gives you a helpline to solicitors and that sort of thing. And they've spent 3 months now reviewing this evidence to see whether they will act on our behalf to put a claim into the small claims court for the damaged cause. I'm hoping really to have heard within the next week or two whether they will do that. Now, of course, as with all solicitors, they're not just going to give their money away, especially when they've only been paid a small amount by Direct Line out of our annual insurance. So they have, again, quite strict criteria as to what they will do and what they won't do. they have to have a greater than 51% chance of a successful claim. Otherwise they obviously won't touch it. They're not just going to go to court, waste their money on a case they can't possibly win. So we will wait and see. If they'll do it for us, great. If not, then I'll just have to do it myself, put a small claims court in, go all through the procedures to do that correctly. It's all quite straightforward and laid out. So I've had to do this before. Most of the cases that we've been in county court for, we've won. We lost one once, a big one, for a Jaguar car damaged whilst it was being repaired. Some of you might be familiar with that case if you've been following the channel for years, but yeah, long story. So I'm quite happy to go to court and do it myself, so we will probably end up doing that. I've also now found out that the neighbour has started ringing around the other neighbours, warning them that I've gone nuts and making all these claims about damage and how I gave them permission to do it. Unfortunately for them, not one of the neighbours believes a word they've said, and this actual video has now been viewed by the neighbours as well, and their family and friends and other neighbours, and they all can't believe what's happened. So yeah, I don't think they believe a single word these two idiots are saying at the moment. Very, very sneaky. If it was a genuine mistake or a misunderstanding, they could have come round the day after I'd gone round there and said, "What on earth do you think you've done?" And when all I got from them was, "Well, it'll all grow back. Don't worry about it." Yeah, unfortunately, this when you chop something off at the trunk, it's not growing back, is it? But if this was a genuine mistake, they could have come round. They could have spoken to Debbie and said, "Look, I'm really sorry. We thought you'd blah blah blah," whatever. There's absolutely no way anyone gave permission for anyone to do that. It's just an outrageous thing to claim. The problem with civil, criminal court is you have to prove a case beyond reasonable doubt, and that's quite a task actually. In the small claims court, it's slightly more relaxed, and I think they word it as on the balance of probability, they did this or they didn't do this. So it's it's a slightly easier thing to prove based on the balance of probability. I don't think anyone that's seen this has been very impressed with what they've done. You probably can't see it on this video, it's not very clear, but even where they've cut through the trunk there, they've managed to split the trunk, and that is going to get water in, and it's probably going to rot and cause further problems to the tree. And you never cut trees in full bloom at the height of the growing season. It's virtually any gardener would know that you don't do things like that. It's ridiculous, hugely damaging. And plus, not only that, they've cut every single branch here. Absolutely no right to do so. You can't tell from this angle, but that trunk there is nearly 3 foot in from the fence panel here. So they've really had to lean in, probably use the ladder that you can see propped up against the extension they've been building. So yeah, absolutely no reason to do any of that. Some of you may be thinking, well, what about right of light and that sort of thing? And there is a right of light law. I think it's a 1959 law to the right of light, and it basically says that if let's say they had a window here and it's been there for 20 years or longer and it's enjoyed a certain degree of light, this is facing west, so you don't even see the sunset on this side really. There's other massive trees further away to our right in other people's gardens. But if I'd suddenly planted a massive tree here and their window had been here for the past 20 years, they would have cause for concern, and that tree may be classed as causing a nuisance and possibly under the Right of Light Act 1959, they could successfully have it removed or reduced in height. There's absolutely no case for that here. As I say, we had carefully pruned this into a fan shape. None of it was going over the fence, and if there was a bit that was, they have been trimming it off, you know, for years at the boundary. No issues with that at all. That's the law. Further up the garden, the two silver birches. If any of you are familiar with silver birches, you'll know that they are very open, whispery, sort of light branched tree. When they're the height they were, just pretty tree. What's ironic is these neighbours have 2 or 3 silver birches at the top of their garden that were higher than ours, and they haven't chosen to cut theirs down. They've obviously let theirs do whatever they want. Again, there is, could you claim right of light? Well, not really. There's no buildings up there. They're nowhere near the house. Even though they've built this extension, that wouldn't qualify because it's only been there a couple of months, not to required 20 years. The trees have been there 10 years. This particular one's 14 years. So they wouldn't qualify on that. So there's lots of different rules, regulations and things that you would need to look into. But yeah, we've done nothing wrong. I'm still outraged by it, frankly, and whilst the police are unable to do anything, which I fully expected, I think we will now just follow this up with the solicitors, and if they won't go for it, then I'll have to do it myself. Can't let people get away with doing this sort of thing. It's absolutely outrageous behaviour. And then just to lie your arse off by saying we gave them permission to do it. Anyone that knows me knows that that is not the case. I'm quite capable of chopping my own trees down, thank you very much. I have chainsaws, pruning equipment, protective chainsaw gear, gloves, you know, your trousers, you name it, I've got it. Because we have had to chop a few old apple trees down in the garden over the years. I'm fully equipped to do any work like that myself. I don't need to rely on an idiot neighbour to help out. So, yeah, you name it, it's wrong on every possible front that you can think of. So, anyway, for anyone that has seen that criminal damage to trees and shrubs, just look at the law. Do not do this to your neighbours. I mean, it's just so stupid. And here's another thing to bear in mind. If you have a legal dispute with a neighbour, when you come to sell your property in the future, you must declare that. If you don't, and it's found out later, you can be liable. I'm not exactly sure for what, but do bear that in mind. Any dispute with neighbours, a legal dispute, has to be mentioned when you are selling your property. So again, I will leave a link. I don't know this guy's name, but his channel is excellent. Blackbeltbarrister, and he's got a secondary channel, Black Belt Secrets, and he is a barrister and explains law and things like that. I found it very, very interesting. He's recently been doing a lot on highway code, traffic signs, traffic offences, that sort of thing. It is fascinating to hear exactly what the law is and all the funny quirks and things that go on in the law. So sometimes what you think may be the law and common sense is not the case. So I'll put a link to his channel. Very well worth watching. Anyway, just a quick update on that.